We are getting closer and closer to the start of NFL free agency, which is really going to start to set the tone for what these teams are going to be doing come draft season. So, if you've seen my mock drafts, if you've seen the mock that I did for Daniel Jeremiah, all of this is hypothetical until we see what happens with free agency. And I'm really excited. Bleacher Report officially dropped their top 50 rankings for free agents this coming year after the Super Bowl. So there's a couple of guys that I had in mind, like Josh Sweat, which I think is going to be at the top of this list. But we're just going to go from 50 down to 1. We're going to see some of the guys that they have ranked, maybe talk about some predictions for players, some hypothetical situations for teams based off of that. And this is going to be a really big year for NFL free agency because, as many of you probably already know, the salary cap is jumping. So a lot of teams have a lot of extra money that they can spend to sign players. I think that means we're going to be seeing some much more expensive contracts for some more traditional role players. So there's probably going to be some jaw-dropping money that we see thrown to guys who may not deserve it. And also, maybe we see a lot more opportunity for players to stick around where they're already at. We're kind of looking at a guy right here in the black and orange, for example, that, maybe Cincinnati's got a little bit more wiggle room with the money they can give him. And maybe we see some things. But let's go into it. And let's start with the top 50 to 46 players. Number 50. So we're going to cruise through some of these early ones. They're more role players, and we don't want to spend too much time talking about them. Mac Hollins, he's had a pretty productive year working with Josh Allen and the Bills. A lot of people in the draft are mocking that the Bills target wide receiver. And if the Bills go wide receiver, that's going to hurt opportunities for him. Maybe he's looking to capitalize on some financial opportunity. Obviously, with how much the Bills are paying Josh Allen, maybe they don't have money to, give Mac Hollins more of an expensive deal, what he may or may not be looking for. But he's an all right player. Can Whiteout replicate his 2024 season away from Joe Brady's offense? That's another great question. He was very productive here, but this has been a journeyman guy. Who's to say? Moving on, number 49, Malcolm Koonce, edge rusher with the Las Vegas Raiders. I like him. I think he's a good player. And I think, this is a situation where he's coming off a season-ending knee injury, but at the same time, he's still a young guy at about 26 years old and does get after the quarterback. And this is a guy who, if a team needs edge help or they want to deepen their rotation that they have to be more competitive, then I think there's going to be a surprisingly high market for a guy like this in terms of positional value. For me, I look at a team like the Arizona Cardinals, and, if they take a swing on, trying to get one of these more premier edge rushers that are going to be above, and they miss, then I think that, much to a lot of teams, you're going to see people falling back to a guy like Malcolm Koonce here as their plan B, plan C option. So I see a very strong market for him. And if he values winning, I could see a world where he wants out of Las Vegas. But there's a lot of stuff up in the air with the Raiders anyways. So, maybe he doesn't want to stick around for that. Maybe he does. Or maybe he just wants to test free agency and see what his value is. But I think he's going to have a strong market going into this upcoming year. Defensive tackle with the Titans, Sebastian Joseph Day. I don't know too much about him. He's a defensive tackle. He's 29 years old. There's probably going to be some interest, as we saw with the Eagles, and as this narrative that I'm hitting home nonstop through my mock drafts, through my criticisms, and honestly appreciations of Daniel Jeremiah for being on the same page as me. I think a lot of teams are going to really go heavy in bolstering their front seven as my ring light falls. LOL. We're going to set that back up. As I said, I think that we're going to see a heavy emphasis on building out the front seven, and, maybe people like Sebastian Joseph Day. We saw some production like that with the Lions last year when they signed, who was it? I can't even remember now. Linval Joseph, was that him? Moving on, though, Levante David, linebacker with Tampa Bay Buccaneers. He's an older guy. He's 35 years old, but he's still a great coverage linebacker, a versatile guy that you can kind of move around in pass-heavy schemes that we live in today. with too high, cover shells. You need that deep dropping middle linebacker or coverage linebacker, and Levante David, he can do that. And there's probably going to be some interest for that vet presence, especially when we look at some of these up and coming teams that are probably going to be in the market for a quarterback, right? So he'll probably come at a premium, but he's just getting up there in age. He can't be one of the more premier options. Christian Fulton, cornerback with the Chargers, he started to bounce around since his time in the Titans. He's a 26-year-old corner. I think this guy could linger a little bit. I don't see a world where he has a particularly strong market. But, for the right price, maybe, you find something for him. Moving forward, this is interesting. Only at 45 do the New Orleans Saints have Chase Young. So I think this guy's absolutely on the move. I don't think the Saints have any money to spend, so there's no chance that they're going to be able to retain this guy. And I once again, similar to what I said with Malcolm Kuntz, I think Chase Young is going to be another guy who's going to be, an interesting option because of positional value. And honestly, they're probably going to be looking at Chase Young for the ceiling. I think this guy has kind of fallen into this mold of player where it's, we saw that defensive rookie of the year caliber season. And a lot of people have just been holding out hope that he can get back to that. And I still see a lot of potential where he could and just be a valuable piece to that edge rushing room in a lot of different teams. I think Chase Young is a player in free agency. It's going to come down to what he's asking for. He did get 34 quarterback pressures. He was moved around a little bit before, obviously, was with the 49ers briefly. But he's still young. He still generates pressure, maybe not getting the amount of sacks that you'd like to see out of a premier edge rusher. But as kind of a second fiddle to a more primary edge rusher, there's probably going to be a strong market for Chase Young. Depending on the team, depending how desperate they are, and depending on what kind of money they have to spend. I think a lot of teams are going to be looking for edge rusher, and I'd be interested to see how many teams are in the market for Chase Young. Also surprised that he's only at 45 here, but he only got 5.5 sacks. He's getting pressure, but he's not getting home. And as an edge rusher, you usually want to see them getting home. Tyrell Dodson, linebacker out of Miami. Miami is probably going to be in the market for some linebackers. I think they released David Long. Tyrell Dodson now is going to be on the market. Maybe they look to retain him. Maybe they look to answer linebacker in the draft. But I don't know too much about him as a player, so we're just going to keep it pushing. EJ Speed came off career highs in both tackles and solo stops. Capable run defender and serviceable in coverage. There's probably going to be some interest here. But once again, I don't know too much about the player to comment extensively. Dante Fowler Jr., Washington Commanders, aging edge rusher. He's going to be 30 years old. This is another guy that I just see lingering. I don't really see people rushing to sign this guy to some sort of contract. He's just a veteran presence that can kind of deliver a little bit of what you need, but had a very strong year. 10.5 sacks, 20 quarterback pressures. He's a serviceable guy that can, get the job done when you need it. Bobby Wagner. I don't understand the hype with Bobby Wagner. I think he's shown that he's been able to age gracefully and that he can change the type of linebacker that he needs to be. But I still think a lot of people, when they think of Bobby Wagner, the player, they think that he's still producing in the same way that he was back in Seattle, and he's not. He's much more of a mid-blitzer now and a contributor within the run game as opposed to being like your true coverage, do-it-all middle linebacker like what he was in Seattle. And I think there's a common misconception there. He certainly provides that, but he's much more of a one-trick pony now in his older years. And PFF has just been loving this guy ever since he came into the league, which I think has just inflated people's perception of what he is. And he continues to get Pro Bowls, but I still see him as a one-trick pony. I think that people are still going to probably try and sign him to one-year deals. I would like to assume that with the Commanders and the amount of money that they have, they wouldn't want to shake things up too much. I see most likely the Commanders look to bring it back. But maybe there's a market for him. Now we're talking about my Detroit Lions. Live Onwuzurike. Yeah, so this was one of our depth defensive linemen that we had. Obviously, he was a little bit more utilized this past year with the injuries to Aleem McNeil. But I think the Lions had decided that this guy wasn't going to be a part of their long-term future by the signing of Linval Joseph, by the use of Aleem McNeil, who's been playing better, honestly. And I think this is just a guy who is the odd man out. He's good at generating pressure from the interior. I'm not stressing too much about the sacks because he plays interior defensive line. And this guy contributed more in the run game, in eating up blocks, redirecting where the run goes, so that way other guys can reap the rewards, which is kind of, the dirty work that comes with being an interior defensive lineman. And he's a serviceable rotation guy. I certainly think for the right price, there's going to be a lot of teams interested. I would also be curious to know what type of money he's looking for, especially knowing the salary cap's going to go up because he is 27, so he's still got some tread on the tires. He's still got some room there. This is a guy I could foresee asking for way more than what he deserves. And depending on the desperation of some teams, maybe even getting it, which I hope not. Running back Aaron Jones, 39th out of Minnesota, and subsequently Green Bay, as we know and love. He's a do-it-all guy. He's not really much of a power guy. He doesn't really bring much in the pass blocking game, but he catches out of the backfield. He runs well. He's got injury concerns. He's an older, aging back. I think this guy brings some splashiness to your offense and can still be very helpful to a team that's looking to bring in a veteran presence in the running back room. Once again, just because of how volatile the running back position is financially, I see him lingering in free agency. I don't see a lot of urgency with teams to address running back until probably after the draft. So I'm going to go ahead and make a bold prediction, maybe that Aaron Jones lingers in free agency longer than we think, and is a guy who looks to sign probably after the draft when we start to really see what people's running back rooms are shaping out as. And I think that's the case, especially this year, because there's such a loaded running back draft class this year. There's guys like Ollie Gordon that dropped in the draft, but we have Amarian Hampton, Ashton Genty, Travion Henderson was in Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft first round. Quinshawn Judkins is another guy that's popping up, right? Like, there's so many running backs in this draft class that I just can't imagine that there's going to be any sense of urgency in free agency addressing the position. Unless it's just getting rotational depth pieces for low contracts. Kevin Zeitler, guard with the Detroit Lions. Once again, this will be a tough loss for us, Detroit Lions. We've lost like all of our coordinators to other coaching opportunities, and losing another guard, that'll be upsetting. We have a very strong offensive line, but at the same time, I'm just gonna say, the Lions have money to spend. We've got about like $55 million. Maybe they throw some of that at Kevin Zeitler and just retain him. But it's saying here that guards are getting a little bit expensive, with Landon Dickerson and Chris Lindstrom both topping $20 million annually last offseason. While Zeitler won't command that sort of money, he'll likely be a premier selling point. Yeah, I mean, you can see the precedent with the Eagles, once again, having one of the strongest offensive lines, much like the Detroit Lions. You can see that bolstering, the front lines of both your offense and defense is how you win, right? Having strong offensive lines, having a strong front seven, and building through the trenches is kind of going to be the direction that we see a lot of teams going. So you look at positions that are traditionally not the most financially sought after or premier positions, now going at premiums like guard, right? So, this guy, Kevin Zeitler, is probably going to test free agency because of that and see what the open market gives him. Don't fault him for it. Little upset about it as a Lions fan, but, props to him for, cashing out on, maybe what is one last contract going into his age 35 year here. Once again, moving forward, I don't understand why Carlton Davis is this high. He didn't really do too much for our Detroit Lions this past year. Of course, after we lost Aiden Hutchinson, our defense was giving up points left and right. And I believe Carlton Davis was struggling with injuries throughout the year, too. So I don't think he was particularly involved as a defensive back, or as much as we would have wanted to. And I think this is a guy we traded for, too. Did end the season on injured reserve with a fractured jaw. As I said, he was injured. And he's getting older. He's getting up there in age. He's on the worst half of his career here. He's certainly not at his peak anymore, like the Tampa Bay days. He's just going to be another veteran presence in somebody's cornerback room. And maybe teams look to get him as a veteran presence. Maybe they still think that there's an opportunity here because he is still, 28 years old. But yeah, I think he's past his prime here. And anybody who pays for him could potentially be overpaying here. Looking at the Seattle Seahawks defensive line, Jaron Reed. Don't know too much about him. He's going to be turning 33. But it looks like Seahawks are trying to get younger, and he's getting older, and they're looking to move on. I believe the Seahawks, they took, who was it? The interior defensive lineman out of Texas last year. So yeah, I think they're just looking to get younger, and he's going to test free agency and see what he gets. I wish I knew more about him as a player, but props to him for seeking out some more money. Moving forward, 35-31, Dante Jackson. Don't understand why he's at 35. He's just a depth guy. I don't see him being anyone that anybody is seeking out in free agency. This guy's been passed around quite a bit in the last couple of years. He's fast, but injury prone, and he's just not really a factor in my opinion. Anthony Nelson, linebacker, Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay is losing a lot of players this year. I wish I had a better understanding of what their cap situation was looking like. But, yeah, losing another linebacker here, Levante David and Anthony Nelson. Tampa Bay may look to retain one of these guys, or hopefully both of these guys, for the right price. But, maybe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are going to be heavily targeting linebackers. I will say in my mock draft, I had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers taking Jahad Campbell, a very versatile and a very flexible linebacker out of Alabama that I think would resolve some of these concerns. But we'll see what they do. But a lot of linebackers leaving Tampa Bay. Safety, Cameron Bynum, Minnesota Vikings. He's going to be out. I feel like the last couple of years, the Vikings have been really trying to find more of a long-term option at safety. Of course, you have Harrison Smith, who is getting older and older and older. And they signed Byron Murphy, a defensive back over there. That has been helping the defensive backs over the years. But, they tried drafting Louis Cine out of Georgia to try and help things out. But I don't think they've really found any sort of long-term stick there. And with how Malachi Starks is falling in the draft, I could certainly see a world where the Minnesota Vikings are targeting him to go to Minnesota. I know how Brian Flores likes to scheme up his defenses, and I think Malachi Starks would be a really good fit for them. So, let's see here. After amassing 137 tackles, 94 solo stops in 2023, he saw a dip in his production, largely because Minnesota's defense improved on the front end. So it looks like he improved on coverage. The defense started making more stops in the front. So that's a lot more run stops, and that's a lot more sacks and pressures in the quarterback that put less strain on the safeties to make plays, which is what they're saying attributed to the dip in stats, despite having what they perceived as a significant jump in his coverage ability. Still young at 27, allowed an opposing passer rating below 80. So yeah, he was playing good in coverage. And safety is an unsexy position, so I think for that reason he's probably going to linger. But for the right team who may not be in a position to get one of the premier safeties in this draft, yeah, absolutely, he could kind of be a bridge guy that can develop, and he's still got a couple of years there. Still with the Minnesota Vikings, Byron Murphy, he played pretty well from what I saw, and I certainly think that a guy like this will be someone that's valued around NFL teams, especially when there's more money to spend in free agency. I think a guy like Byron Murphy, I'm going to have another bold prediction here, is going to be a guy that gets a significantly more he gets significantly more money than what a player with the exact same ability level and skill would get in any other free agency year because the salary cap increase this year. I think he's going to be reaping the rewards of timing here in his contract, and he may not be entirely worth it, but he's a good corner, and he can certainly provide value and make an instant impact right away. I just worry that he becomes very overpaid. Ernest Jones, love this guy. This guy was passed around, and the Seattle Seahawks traded for him from the Rams, I believe, for a steal. I think they actually swapped linebackers, and then they kicked in like a sixth or seventh to get him. But I really like Ernest Jones. He's a really versatile and really impactful linebacker going back to his time in Tennessee. Productive at every stop. He was a full-time starter since arriving in Seattle in October at just 25 years old. He has a potential to be a long-term star on defense, and PFF had him ranked 46th among all linebackers in run defense this past year. I think Ernest Jones is going to be a guy that's sought after. He's young, he's developmental, and he's productive, and he does exactly what you need to. And I think if teams have money to spend, linebacker is a very unsexy position as well. So I think a lot of teams are probably going to be looking to address it in free agency because there's probably going to be more premier positions that they're looking to address in the draft. I know the style of drafting nowadays that we see in the modern NFL is going best player available. And, looking at the linebackers in the draft, maybe the best player available is going to be at another position. So signing a guy like Ernest Jones to fill that role, absolutely. There's going to be a lot of teams in the market for him. Number 30, DeMarcus Lawrence, defensive end of the Dallas Cowboys. They still have to pay Micah Parsons. They have not paid Micah Parsons yet. And it would be beneficial for them to settle that sooner rather than later because there's going to be other edge rushers that are going to be coming down the pipeline asking for money. And if those guys get signed first, then Mike is going to be asking for more than whatever they get signed to. But that just means that they're not going to have money to throw at DeMarcus Lawrence. He's an aging, productive edge rusher. And I think this guy will be sought after for the right price, probably on a more short-term deal. But once again, I think that there's a lot of edge rushers here that could provide value for a lot of teams that are in the market for edge rushers. And I think DeMarcus Lawrence will probably be looking to get a more expensive 1 or 2 year deal just to kind of, capitalize on the market right now. So there's definitely going to be teams in the market for him. Charles Omenihu, is this the first round pick that the Chiefs took a couple years ago that just hasn't really panned out? Let's see here. Missed much of 2024 while recovering from an ACL. Still young at 27. A sack, 3 tackles for loss, and a forced fumble during the 2024 postseason. 2 years ago in 23, he tallied 7 sacks, 5 TFLs, 11 quarterback hits, and 2 forced fumbles. So I think a lot of people are banking on upside here and banking that he comes back perfectly fine from his ACL tear. I don't know too much about Omenihu as a player to comment, but this is another guy. He's probably going to capitalize on the market here, and he's probably going to be in a lot of teams' free agency boards because he's still young, he's developmental, and he made impacts during the postseason when it counted most. He was getting a sack, 3 TFLs, and forcing a fumble during the past postseason. And once again, postseason performers, they capitalize in free agency. And we're going to talk about that when we see Josh Sweat. That's going to be another guy that absolutely is going to capitalize in the market because of his postseason success. And maybe teams see Charles Omenihu as that exact same thing. Once again, edge rusher Hassan Reddick. I don't know what the market's going to look like for this guy. I don't know what the market's going to look like for this guy because of everything that's happened with all of his trades the past couple of years with the Jets and with the Eagles. This guy has just been a very unhappy person and very unwilling to play under the guise of unrenewed contract, despite being an aging presence and despite not really doing much this past year. But before he was traded and when he was with Philly, he was a very productive edge rusher. This guy has had an interesting career in the NFL. He was drafted as a linebacker and was switched to edge and was an undersized edge. And for most of his career was kind of viewed as just this role guy. And then kind of came on strong a little bit in Carolina before really finding home in Philadelphia in what his role was and kind of really set the tone for some of these smaller, bendier edge rushers that we're starting to see, more like Nolan Smith, who's kind of now the guy over there filling in that role for the Eagles. And you look at other guys coming down the pipeline like James Pierce out of Tennessee. He kind of set a precedent, but he's also, on the other side of 30 now. Has a little bit of a messy history with how he works with teams and organizations. I don't know what the market's going to look like for a guy like this because of that. And I could see a world where he lingers in free agency until teams take a swing at other options, whether they be younger developmental guys or guys with less concerns behaviorally, if that makes sense. Justin Simmons, safety out of Atlanta. They have him ranked highly, unsexy position. This guy lingered in free agency last year forever before finally getting signed to Atlanta. I don't see why that's any different this next year. It's an unsexy position. I don't think teams are going to be stressing too much about it. He's older as a player, obviously 31 years old. I don't see him being a sought-after prospect in free agency this year. I think eventually he'll probably find a home, but once again, I don't think it's going to be urgent, and I'd be curious to see what it pans out to be. Probably another one-year deal. Russell Wilson, I think, is going to have a strong quarterback market. He played pretty decently before falling apart in Pittsburgh, but I think he did enough to put himself in a bidding war with a lot of different teams. Obviously, we don't know what's going to happen in the draft with quarterbacks, but we could be looking at the Raiders, who don't want to have to deal with another year of Aiden O'Connell, and obviously pairing up with Pete Carroll again makes a lot of sense. We look at the Jets, who want to move on from Aaron Rodgers. Maybe Russell Wilson is the option. Mike Tomlin, while he said he's kind of out on Justin Fields and he's kind of out on Russell Wilson, you never really know what's going to happen with that. Maybe they look to take a swing and bring him back. You've got the Saints and what's going on with this whole Derek Carr situation. Maybe they'll look to go there. Obviously, you've got the Giants and Daniel Jeremiah mocked Travis Hunter the Giants. So I think that means that he was probably thinking that they had another idea in mind, whether it's taking a quarterback later or whether it's getting one of these veteran guys, whether that be trading for Matt Stafford or signing Russell Wilson. So there's absolutely going to be a market for this guy. I'd be curious to see how it pans out, where it ends up, and how much it's going to be for. And hopefully some of these older, aging quarterbacks don't look too highly at Kirk Cousins' contract that he got in Atlanta and start asking for those crazy numbers, because that would set a ridiculous precedent. Amari Cooper is number 25. Good player, aging player. I think he's going to sign for probably a team with a chance to compete for a Super Bowl. That's my prediction. Asante Samuel, cornerback out of the Chargers. While he's going to be a free agent, I think he stays. The Chargers got a lot of money to spend. He's a valuable piece to what they're doing over there. I don't see a world where John Harbaugh lets him go. Once again, Tevin Jenkins with the Bears. I think that they probably want to try and get as much offensive line help for Caleb Williams as possible. He's a 26-year-old going into free agency. Guard is starting to get more and more expensive. Maybe he priced himself out of Chicago, but maybe he tests the market and sees what's happening. Obviously, you look at the Vikings, who had Darisaw go down with an injury, and the Patriots, who have tons of money to spend. Yeah, absolutely makes sense. Tevin Jenkins is a little bit more of a one-trick pony in that he can kind of only do one thing on the offensive line. Let's see, what did they say here? Also injury-prone. PFF ranked him 15th among guards in 2024. I think this guy's good against the pass, but I still think he struggles against the run. Yeah. Mekhi Becton. I think there's going to be a market for this guy. He was a former top pick with the Jets, and I think once again, postseason success catapulted this guy into the stratosphere. I think he's going to get a great deal somewhere with somebody who needs offensive line help. I think he showed enough to get enough teams to buy into the potential of what he could be again, and I think he's going to get paid. B.J. Hill, defensive tackle with the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals, they're struggling for money. Their owner does not like to pay players. Yeah, I could certainly see a world where this guy leaves. Another good interior defensive presence. And look at this. They're referencing the Christian Wilkins deal from last year where he signed with the Raiders. 4 years, $110 million deal. Hill's probably going to be looking at that money. And he's probably going to try and get it out of somebody, especially when the salary cap rises like this. I wouldn't be surprised. Let him go after it. With Le'Veon Enrique leaving, I hope he doesn't go to the Lions. But, at the end of I think what the Lions need is more edge help for Aiden Hutchinson. But, I hope that's not where our money goes. Dre Greenlaw, he had some injury concerns this past year, but really dynamic linebacker. And certainly is going to have a market somewhere around the NFL. Let's see here. 2 games in 2024 before landing back on IR, and we had that whole situation that happened where the linebacker quit on the team. But this guy is a really good player, and if he can stay healthy, if he can pass physicals and show teams what they're looking for, I think this is going to be a sought-after guy. Cincinnati and Washington. Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be a guy that can help you compete. And this is going to be a guy that can help make plays when it matters most in the postseason. Cam Robinson, offensive tackle with the Minnesota Vikings. Just another guy, another offensive tackle that Pro Football Focus really likes. Ranked him at 49th among 141 tackles. He's going to be turning 30 in October. So he's still under the age of 30, so this is probably going to be a guy that gets paid. I see what they're saying about the Browns, but I also don't really see why they would say the Browns is going to be a good fit because of the financial situation. The Deshaun Watson deal is absolutely screwed that organization from being able to sign key players. And even if they trade Myles Garrett, they're still going to be in a bad financial situation. So I don't think they're going to be able to swing this, but Kansas City is going to be needing every single bit of offensive line help that they can get. Creed Humphrey can't do it all himself. Joe Thuney can't do it all himself. Trey Smith is obviously leaving. I could see the Chiefs is doing it. Nick Bolton, I think, is a guy the Chiefs need to keep. If the Chiefs lose out on Nick Bolton, that's going to be a huge loss for them as a franchise. This guy is super important to what they do on the defensive side. Obviously, they have Chris Jones, who is a dynamic interior defensive lineman. But Nick Bolton is such a pivotal piece to what they do, and still extremely young at 24 years old. Maybe this is what it comes down to for the Chiefs. They got a lot of guys that are hitting free agency here that they can't continue to pay. I saw something that was talking about Travis Kelce's situation, and that if the Chiefs decide to cut Travis Kelce, they could free up like $19 million to sign players elsewhere. And with a deep tight end class that we're seeing, if they really parted ways with Travis Kelce, that could really help save them in terms of signing and retaining other players in their team. That would, in theory, make the team better. But Nick Bolton is a key piece, and that would really suck for the Chiefs to see him go. But teams with money, right? The Chargers and the Titans. I think there's going to be a huge market for Nick Bolton. This guy is such a great player, and would make a lot of teams happy. Rasul Douglas, this guy has a huge market because of his ability to play in the slot as a nickel, which is a huge role that we've seen blow up in the NFL with guys like Cooper DeJean, with guys like Rasul Douglas here. Being able to have a strong nickel corner is super important into how things happen here. And then Trent McDuffie was another guy with the Chiefs. He's 29. He's on the older side of things, but this is a guy who's absolutely going to have a market. It's going to be a little bit awkward of a market because is going to be kind of groundbreaking a little bit because he's not really like your dynamic number one corner. He plays a specific role, which is nickel. And because of that, I'd be curious to see where teams value that financially when you're not paying him to be a boundary outside guy. But he's certainly going to have a lot of interest. Khalil Mack, still kicking around, still getting the job done. He's certainly past his prime, but in terms of a veteran edge presence to bring some stability to the position for a team, I could absolutely see a world where this happens. Really, any team that needs the help. I am looking at my Detroit Lions, just saying. I think this is a guy that would align well with the financial trajectory of the Detroit Lions, a team that's got money to spend right now, but's got a lot of contracts coming on the horizon. Khalil Mack's probably not going to be asking for a long-term deal, right? It sounds like a mutually beneficial pairing, but once again, there's a lot of teams that need edge help. They put the 49ers and the Falcons. There's going to be a market for Khalil Mack. I don't think there's going to be an urgent market for Khalil Mack, but there's going to be a market. Justin Fields, I think he would be a great fit with the Las Vegas Raiders, if I'm being completely honest. I've said this before. I actually love the pairing of Brock Bowers and Michael Mayer. And I think that, honestly, they should do a lot of stuff similar to how the Baltimore Ravens do things. Operate more out of 12 personnel, more heavy run schemes, 2 tight end sets, utilize the skills of Bowers and Michael Mayer. They don't have a strong wide receiver room, so it takes less stress off there. Utilize Justin Fields' ability to scramble as a runner. And I think there's a really good pairing there. I don't think that with Pete Carroll as the head coach, that's the type of offense that happens there. But I think his best fit would be the Raiders, just looking at it from that perspective. But this guy's still young. He was a top 10 pick. And there's going to be a market for this guy given the quarterback landscape right now. And I'd be willing to bet this guy gets a pretty lucrative deal. He's probably going to get like a 2-3 year deal. It's going to be a good amount of money. Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be a market for this guy. I am very curious to see. They say the Giants and the Titans. I think the Titans make a lot of sense. I think the Giants are probably looking more for a stable veteran presence or a young guy to develop. And I think Fields is kind of a tweener with regard to that. And I think looking at how much they spent on Daniel Jones, they probably have a little bit of hesitation about paying a lot of money to a quarterback, which is what it would take to sign Justin Fields, I think, in free agency. Talanoa Hufanga, safety out of with the San Francisco 49ers. I think this guy would be a really good fit with the Houston Texans, pairing him alongside Jalen Petrie. They need help with their defense. The Texans are close. I still like C.J. Stroud, who had a down year. For the right price, I think this would be a really helpful and versatile piece to a lot of teams. I think it's an unsexy position, though, as a safety. And depending on positional value and positional need with a lot of these teams, he may not get the most lucrative deal. But once again, he's 26 years old. You're going to be banking on his upside coming off of an ACL back in 2023. But once again, he's far enough removed from that ACL now where, hopefully he can be a little bit more recovered from that. But, we'll certainly see, looking at the Ravens and the Bengals as teams to potentially sign him. I think it comes down to price point, and I think it comes down to what Talanoa is looking for out of his next team. Does he want to compete? Does he want to chase the bag? Maybe that'll shape things. Chris Godwin, I don't know this guy as a person, but I think he's going to chase the bag. I think he's going to go where the money is. He's getting older. He's had a lot of really good years in Tampa Bay, but he's never been the dynamic number one option. He's always played second fiddle to Mike Evans, and he's always done a lot of slot underneath stuff, which is a valuable role to play, but he's never been asked to be a number one. And I think he's going to try and play the market here and get paid like one. So I'm willing to bet someone overpays for him, gives him a multi-year deal that they soon go to regret. I'm getting nightmares and flashbacks to the Calvin Ridley Tennessee Titans deal here with this one, and I wouldn't be surprised if something like that happens. Look at Jacksonville, who's had a bad swing of luck with the wide receivers that they've paid with Christian Kirk and with Gabe Davis. I don't think that Jacksonville does it because of that. Um, but Carolina Panthers trying their best to get anything that can help out Bryce Young's development. I wouldn't be surprised. That makes a lot of sense, but that would be interdivision. He'd have to play his old team twice a year. That'd be interesting. Zach Bond, another dynamic playoff performer, was once seen to be a role player in New Orleans and has since become one of the best linebackers in the NFL this past year. Certainly going to have a market, certainly going to be attractive to a lot of teams, and was very influential in the team's success. Teams with money, the New England Patriots and the Washington Commanders, absolutely teams that are trying to start turning that corner. The Patriots are trying to usher into this Drake May era and start to compete and win. The Washington Commanders, they're trying to get everything they can do to go over that hump that they got to this year and make it to a Super Bowl with Jaden Daniels while he's on his rookie deal and they've got money to spend. Yeah, absolutely. Young edge rusher Azeez Ojulari, I think, is absolutely going to look to get paid this year. He's in a tough spot with the Giants where they have Kayvon Thibodeau, who was a top pick, and then you have Brian Burns, who they traded for, and then you have Dexter Lawrence. This guy's probably looking for expansion in the role that he has with the team and is looking to get paid like it. Let's see here. 8 sacks, 27 QB pressures, 13 quarterback hits. Faded into the background after that as the Giants used their first-round pick on Kayvon Thibodeau and traded for Brian Burns. Yeah, this is a guy who's lost a lot of opportunity because of it, but flashes a lot of talent, flashes a lot of potential on what he could be. And this is a guy who I think is going to get paid. Once again, you're looking at the Raiders and you're looking at the Bengals. I would be really happy to see the Lions take a swing at this and get a young guy with potential that they can pair along Aiden Hutchinson for the right price. But I think this guy's going to have a huge market because he's still young and developmental and flash a lot of potential. And maybe you can get him at a song because of it. But we'll see. Milton Williams, another front seven guy for the Eagles. I think he's going to look to get a lot of money. It looks like everybody is mocking interior defensive line for our Lions. Maybe I would prefer edge and address defensive line in what I think is a really deep defensive line class this upcoming year. But we'll see. Ronnie Stanley, he's getting up there in age. He's not the same player that he used to be. He's certainly injury prone, but I certainly see as kind of a rental option for a couple of years, maybe just a year, filling a hole. Kansas City Chiefs, Cleveland Browns. If you can get them for the right price on a cheap deal or on a one-year deal, something like that makes a lot of sense for a lot of teams. Wouldn't be surprised. Charvarius Ward's going to get paid. I think it's going to be New England. I think someone's going to throw a crap ton of money at this guy and hope that he's their guy. He's been a super impactful piece for the 49ers, and it looks like they're losing their entire defense right now with Talanoa Hufanga going, Drake Greenlaw going, and Charvarius Ward going. I'd be curious to see who San Francisco tries to retain. And in Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft, he had them getting Will Johnson out of Michigan at the 11th pick. I don't think he's going to be there. So maybe they reach on a cornerback because of their desperation. But, I think the Commanders certainly make a lot of sense in just acquiring as much talent as they can with the money that they have while they're in a Super Bowl window. The Chiefs, I think that they have to move a lot of money around and they'd be losing opportunities on a lot of guys. I think New England is going to be the team that takes a swing on him. DJ Reed, he's an older guy. I think this is a guy that would probably be on a lot of teams' board as a plan B or a plan C. But he was a good second fiddle with Sauce Gardner, but they got to look at other options. I'm surprised that he's 28, but I just thought he was older. Looks like they're saying the Jets might retain him or go to the Raiders. I think he's going to be a good number 2 option. I couldn't trust this guy as a dynamic number 1, though. He's too short, and I think he has a capped ceiling because of that. Alaric Jackson, offensive tackle with the Rams. Don't know much about him, but I believe this is a guy who they had drafted young, and he really burst onto the scene here. in 2024. Yeah, yeah. PFF rated him as the 18th best overall tackle in 2024. Um, though the 2021 undrafted free agent has been more impactful in the run game than as a pass protector, he's still better than what a lot of teams have on their quarterbacks' blind sides. So, as a blindside protector, obviously that position comes at a premium. This guy's probably going to get paid for what was a very successful 2024 year for him. Does he stay with the Rams? Can they retain him? Obviously, there's a lot of question marks about what's happening with Matt Stafford, what's happening with Cooper Kupp. Maybe if they do make those moves, they have a lot more money that they can spend at, making a move like this. But if they look to retain Matt Stafford, who wants to get paid probably double what he's getting right now, they probably won't be able to afford this guy. So New England taking a swing on him. The Saints, I don't know if they have the money to do it, but they might try. Sure. Sam Darnold. What's going to happen with Sam Darnold? This dude, I think, is going to have a market. I think it's going to come down to price and who's willing to give the most money. I think the Vikings are looking to usher in a new era with J.J. McCarthy. And I think you saw the ceiling of Sam Darnold in the playoffs this year. And, I think you're going to see that some of these quarterback purgatory teams are going to try and take a swing. Who do we have as the predictions for Sammy Darnold? The Raiders and the Titans. Yep, I couldn't be more unsurprised. The Raiders are kind of on the outside looking in when it comes to quarterback. It looks like if they want to draft the guy that they want, they're going to have to trade up to do it. But are they willing to give up the draft capital and resources required to do that? Maybe not. The Tennessee Titans, maybe they look to go with best player available. Maybe they, go with the edge rusher Abdul Carter out of Penn State with their number 1 pick. Or maybe they trade down to a team that needs a quarterback like the Giants or like the Raiders, go best player available at 3 or 6, and then sign Sam Darnold where he has a little bit more around him. Maybe that's the case with the Titans, and I could absolutely see a world where he goes there and they're done with Meme of the Year Will Levis. But I think there's going to be tons of teams that are in the market for a guy like Sam Darnold. Javon Holland, I am a huge fan of as a safety. This is my favorite safety in the free agency class. I think there's going to be a big market for him. I think he's going to be the number 1 safety on most people's boards. But once again, it's an unsexy position. The ceiling that he's going to get, I think, is capped. And I just don't think safeties are going to be a premium in free agency this year. And but nonetheless, he's going to get a great contract. And they say the Chicago Bears, who are known for their defense, known for their defensive back play, and going and helping out Jalen Johnson, I could see it. And the Raiders, just acquiring talent. It could certainly make sense. The Raiders have shown that they're willing to spend money with what they gave Christian Wilkins, right? Josh Sweat, I think, is an Arizona Cardinal. I think they do anything that they can to get this guy over there and help out that edge rushing team over there. They need to be able to get pressure on the quarterback, and they just have not been able to do it. And what this guy did in the Super Bowl to Patrick Mahomes and that Chiefs offensive line, this dude deserves to get paid. He was an absolute havoc wrecker. Arizona Cardinals, New England Patriots, you're going to have to spend money to make this happen. And I wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals do anything that they can to make it happen. But also, the Patriots, they got more money. So maybe it's New England, but we'll see. T. Higgins, I could see a world where he stays. I could see a world where Cincinnati franchise tags him and then he looks to try and sign him to a little bit more long-term deal. At the same time, I could see a sign-and-trade situation happen here where Cincinnati signs him and then trades him away to another team. But at the same time, T. Higgins, if the Cincinnati Bengals don't franchise tag him or T. Higgins refuses to play on a franchise tag and seek out some sort of trade, I could certainly see the New England Patriots paying this dude a crap ton of money. The Tennessee Titans, I don't think it's going to happen. They paid DeAndre Hopkins. They paid Calvin Ridley. It didn't really pan out. I think they'll probably make an offer, but I think that the Patriots would probably be the most ideal fit. But I hope not. I'd also love to see the Green Bay Packers. I think T. Higgins would fit really well with the Green Bay Packers as that dynamic number one in a sea of what is wide receiver twos over there, especially with Christian Watson's late season-ending injury. That's going to put him out for a long time and probably affect how he comes back. And number one, they had the Kansas City Chiefs taking Trey Smith, the guard out of Tennessee, actually, go Vols. And I could absolutely see a world where this guy looks to get paid by somebody. He's a great talent, and he's going to be really sought after. There's going to be a bidding war for him. Once again, we're looking at the Bears, who need to protect Caleb Williams, who is heavily pressured in Chicago, and the New England Patriots. Two teams with young quarterbacks they drafted last year, looking to get any type of protection that they can for their young stud. But absolutely. But what do you like about this? What do you agree with, disagree with? Who do you think is going to get paid the most? Who do you think is going to get overpaid? Who are guys that you disagreed with the rankings here? Let me know in the comments below. And I look forward to seeing how this free agency is going to pan out. But once again, I have my mock draft in my YouTube videos down below. I have my review of Daniel Jeremiah's mock draft down below. And I did a little bit more of a deep dive into Cam Ward, the player, to talk about him a little bit, a guy who could potentially be the next number one pick. But with that being said, I'll catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, everyone. Peace.